Opinions stated in this podcast should not be used as evidence. Assume that any cited evidence can be found in the related Candor Briefs releases. Thank you, and welcome to Former Partners.
Hello, and welcome back to the Former Partners Podcast. I am Lucas.
And I am Quentin.
And we are Former Partners.
Former Partners.
Yeah, we're a couple of high school burnouts that never really did anything. And we enjoyed debate while we were there, saw a little bit of a success in it. And so now we're hoping to pass any wisdom that we can find onto you.
We're having some trouble finding it, though.
Oh, for sure. But you guys are helping us slowly but surely.
Wise, honestly. Did I say my name? I'm Quentin.
He is Quentin. He did say his name.
That's Lucas.
I'm Lucas that is talking at the moment. Great. We're going to confuse our listeners right out of the start. Today
we're talking about the March public forum topic about market rate housing. Before we jump into that, we have a couple things. First,
okay.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day if this is out and you're listening on Valentine's Day. If you're not listening on Valentine's Day, I hope you had a happy Valentine's Day.
Listen to the Former Partners podcast with your current partner or partners.
It's true. You have to include the polyamorous folks.
Yes. It's up to you. Do whatever you want. Also, we've been talking a lot about the Recency iOS app. It's going to be out real soon. I'm excited about it. I hope you guys are. I don't know exactly when it's going to be out, but just soon, I would say, is all I'm going to say on that. Now, also, nationals. Do you remember talking about this, going to nationals and everything?
Yeah, we'd expressed some interest in potentially doing a booth at the NSDA National Tournament so that we could do a meet and greet and get some community opinion. Upon looking into it, it's not that it wouldn't be worth it for us to go to nationals. It's that we don't really have the pull nor the funding to do it, because you essentially have to have a lot of pull or a lot of funding, one or the other,
or both,
ideally. And we are not a large enough group to be considered a sponsor, and we don't really have the funds to rent out the booth ourselves, and plus the times that are available to non-sponsors aren't ideal.
Yes,
but there's a chance we could still be there.
Yes, we are talking about still going just for judging and to be around. You know, just because we don't have a booth doesn't mean we can't still be present.
And I think it'd be very easy for us to still arrange a specific time and place meet and greet if you guys were wanting to do that. So really what we're asking for with this is from you, the listeners, if you're going to be at the NSDA National Tournament, you wouldn't know now probably, but if you think you're going to be there, or if you're going already and you know it, let us know via email or comments below if you're listening on YouTube that you'd like to see us.
Yeah. So we want to go if there's interest in it.
I'd
We're
say
not
if
gonna have a booth.
If like 25 people say, hey, we'd like to see you guys, that would definitely be enough to incentivize us going.
Yeah.
Because we have the ability to go regardless of if we're going to do a meet and greet, but we've said it before and we've said it many times. We work other jobs, and so we'd have to take time off of those jobs to do this. So if you all aren't going to be there, we don't really want to go.
Yeah, that's straight up. So that's that. Let us know if you'd like to see us there, and we'll try to make something happen. The brief will be ready in a few days. I've gotten way too many emails about it.
The Candor Brief is what he's talking about currently.
Yeah. Chill out. Slow your roll. It's not even halfway through February yet. It'll be available soon. So, I'll let you guys know.
It's the shortest month of the year, though.
Yeah, that's making it a little bit harder on me, too. Because I usually just shoot for the middle but the middle is a lot sooner than, not a lot sooner.
It's like 1 day sooner.
Whatever. I'm also getting ready to start releasing order forms, like package subscriptions, to schools that are interested for the 2019-2020 season for Canter Briefs. If your school gets a subscription, you save a lot of money on the briefs, upwards of $100 sometimes, buying in bulk for this season.
Plus, then you have the ability to, with a good conscience, distribute the brief to all of your teammates.
Correct.
Because, I mean, obviously, we're not going to pursue anybody who's distributing the brief to other people because we're not in a position to do that, and it's not really something that we care that much about. But we do need pretty much every spare dime we can get to keep this going and keep it high quality for you guys, and to continue to raise the quality even.
So if your school would be interested in buying a subscription for Canter Briefs, let me know either through email or Twitter or in the comments, and I will send you the order form whenever it is ready. In terms of subscriptions, and we're almost done talking about all this stuff and getting to the topic, but I did decide to go ahead and put on canterdebate.com, the website that all of our brief sales go through. If you are interested in the briefs for the rest of the season, there's a package on there that gets you the first and second release and any supplemental releases for March, April, May, and June for $130. That saves you $50 on all the briefs. So if you're going to be going to districts and state and nationals or NCFL or whatever, that season package is a good option for you.
And it's unlikely but possible that you live in a state that is going to do a different state topic for public forum than the national topic. If that is the case that you're encountering, email us and we might be able to work something out.
Right. Always willing to work with people on whatever if I can. So that being said, let's move into the March topic.
The March topic is resolved. The United States should promote the development of market rate housing in urban neighborhoods.
Yes. So I want to say that we talked about this a little bit, that the trigger for this topic was just the housing crisis.
Yeah, it's weird because a lot of public forum topics have a pretty clear trigger. You can kind of backtrack CNN or MSNBC or Fox, anybody, like 3 to 6 months and figure out, based on some headlines, why we're talking about what we're talking about. This one I kind of drew a blank on. I couldn't really find any major legislation, anybody who's advocating for housing redevelopment or anything that's happening right now or even recently. So I think this might just be them finally getting around to having us talk about the housing crisis.
And actually, I remember us talking briefly about this. California is working on some kind of legislation.
Are they?
Yeah.
I'm going to give that a quick Google while you talk about other stuff.
Okay. So market rate housing, let's read through some definitions on this resolution. The first one is should. If you've listened to our podcast at all, gotten to Canter Briefs at all, you know that the resolution or the definition we like to use for the word should is that it expresses a moral obligation. So that framing of that word brings the resolution into a moral standpoint, which I think is good. Whenever you're talking about topics like this that aren't expressly economic, you should usually go the moral route. Looking at promote, the definitions are really pretty clear. Merriam-Webster defines promote as to contribute to the growth or prosperity of, support or actively engage, to encourage people to like, buy, use, do, or support something. Essentially, it's showing support. Now, did you find anything?
Yeah, so this might actually be the trigger, just to backstep a little bit. It seems as though in the 2017 to 2018 legislative period for the California state government, they passed something like 13 new laws regarding housing.
Okay. Yeah, so they're working ham on it.
Yeah, so they're doing a lot on changing housing laws and regulations, especially with urban and densely populated zones, it looks like.
Yeah.
So that might have been our trigger, and that would probably be a good place for you guys to start when you're trying to figure out why this topic exists. There's a pretty good page on lexology.com. That's what I found. I don't know their credibility, but the information seems legit. And there's hyperlinks, so even if the website's crap, you can go somewhere else.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that was probably the trigger, was California working on it. Because the Bay Area is having a lot of serious housing issues.
I mean, it makes sense. It's probably, the second most populated... No, I bet it's the most populated state in the United States.
I don't know.
California and New York. Yeah, but New York is just... I mean, the most densely populated area in the U.S. is New York City, but I don't think that the total might still be higher in California because it's just so big.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So that's what promote is. Back to the definitions of the resolution. Promote is to encourage. In essence, that's what it means. And now, whenever we're talking about development, there's a lot of different definitions that could fit here. I would say Cambridge Dictionary, the process of growing or changing and becoming more advanced. So the advancement, development, and I know you guys know what these words mean, but the definition of these words sets framework up for the entire debate. So that's why it's important. What was that look you just gave me?
I think California is definitely the trigger, just based on what I just learned, because if the census data is correct, then California is actually twice as populated as the state of New York.
Wow.
Just about 40 to 50 million people there.
That's a lot of
There's
people.
only about 20 million people in New York.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Huh.
So yeah, when you're considering around 350 million Americans, 50 million of them live in California, and they just passed 14 new laws on housing, definitely a good place to start for this topic.
Yeah. You know, it's really funny. Whenever I started making the definitions page on this, so promote is to contribute to the growth or prosperity of, and we're talking about promoting the development of something. So promote is to contribute to the growth or prosperity of, and one definition of develop is to make active or promote the growth of. So the resolution is the United States should contribute to the growth or prosperity of the making active or promotion of the growth of market rate housing. Isn't that annoying?
It's a little recursive, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of frustrating.
I sat in here and just like screamed for like 45 seconds.
I believe it.
One of those words isn't necessary in my mind. Anyway, that's what development is. Now, market rate housing, that's where it gets a little bit weird. There is you can't look this word up in the dictionary. It's a term used. You can look up market rate and add housing on, but it all ends up being about the same thing. It's essentially normal rent. It's rent that isn't price locked by anything. It's not subsidized. It's not Section 8. There's no vouchers. It's just somebody rents a house.
Okay, so it's all normal renting situations that fall within fair market levels.
Right. There's the only thing that sets the precedent of price is what the market price is right now in that area.
Okay.
So there's no subsidization or anything. And that's what market rate housing is. So whenever they're talking about promoting the development of market rate housing, they're talking about just developing new, normal.
They're just talking about building
apartments
houses and apartments. Yeah.
Nothing special about them. Just totally normal, at least in their financing. So it's pretty easy to envision what's happening. Market rate housing. It's such a, whenever I heard the term, I was like, oh geez, what is that? And then I looked it up and I was like, wait, that's normal stuff. That's normal houses. So Urban neighborhood. That's the last part of the resolution. And it's very specific. Urban neighborhood essentially is just downtown. Now, there are some definitions of urban, like populated, built-up area with a population greater than 5,000, which isn't that much. But that's what urban is. I consider it downtown areas.
Yeah, this is where a little confusion might come into play. So you're going to have urban areas and you're going to have suburban areas. And a suburb is not an urban area. That's just an urban area that's built outside of town or close to town, essentially. And I think that when people think urban, almost by default nowadays, they kind of think suburban. Yeah. I don't know. Because there's not a lot of, I don't know, when you think about the downtown of a city, you don't think about moving there to live in the downtown. Right. You think about moving close to the city, living in a suburb, and then going to the city when you need to do stuff.
So the reason I say I think of downtown is because this definition from Beckens Moving Solution, I don't know what it is, but they explain it pretty well. An urban neighborhood is usually found in the downtown core of a city. Just as simple as that. Now, this is up to you. I did find, I don't know where it's at now.
What?
There was a really good explanation for what all the different like levels of urban and where it switches to suburban. And I don't know why it's not here, but I'll try to cut that and make sure it's in the brief. Urban neighborhood is up to you how you want to describe that or define it. And that could, I mean, it's going to be huge on framework, I think. That your definition of what an urban neighborhood is, since it's specific to the resolution, could make or break arguments.
Oh, for sure. Because there's like you just said, these aren't things that are easily definable in a dictionary. So you're not just going to come to an agreement with your opponents right out of the gate. You're going to have to framework, set up your side, and then probably do a little bit of argumentation about why you're legitimate. Not necessarily why you're correct, because there are more than one ways to frame around.
Yeah.
But just why it's legitimate, why you have merit to what you're saying.
Yeah. And one thing that's going to come up, I would say every round in this topic, is going to be gentrification. And I know. Should I bleep that word out?
So it's funny. We use a little bit of a cheat tool when we're doing these podcasts. This is a really quick sidebar. Quentin writes the outlines almost every time. And this last outline he wrote while rather sleep deprived, because some of the notes are less than appropriate for me to put on the air. But the ones for gentrification were pretty funny, where he was treating it like it was a curse word and it was bleeped out. It made me laugh.
Every article about gentrification, they're all so quirky. All the articles start out by saying, gentrification is not a bad word. It's so annoying. But yeah, I wrote that outline. It was like 4 a.m. I was very tired, but I knew I needed to get it done because I was going to sleep until you came over.
But anyway, back to gentrification.
Gentrification is this event or occurrence that happens when higher income, higher educated households move into lower income, lower educated neighborhoods, and the effects that they have on that neighborhood. Now, it's generally seen as a bad thing, but there are some benefits. I think it's going to come up in probably every debate.
Yeah, if it doesn't come up every debate, it's still going to come up often, because you're talking about housing developments, and you're talking specifically about housing developments that aren't locked for low-income persons. So there's already, by default, there's going to be people worrying about these developments being too expensive, what kind of effects that's going to have, and the gentrification that's going to follow naturally.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of the actual definitions of gentrification are pretty biased, because they always talk about the improvement of a neighborhood or city, which isn't always the case. But that's what gentrification is. It's just the effects that occur when rich educated people move into poor uneducated neighborhoods. And it's not just a snap process. It usually takes a little bit.
Yeah, this is like a decade type effect.
Yeah.
Like you move a dozen rich families into a town of 5,000.
Yeah.
And after a decade, because of the interactions between the parents and the kids of the rich people with the new kids of the less affluent people, you ultimately end up with a new type of culture, usually.
Yeah. And the last term I wanted to go over before we actually get into some analysis and argumentation is HUD. This is one that comes up probably in once at least every article that I read and study. HUD is just the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. If this resolution was a plan or a policy topic, HUD would probably be the agent. They are the ones that do housing development for the United States, at least on the federal level. And they have a lot of sub-acronyms under them that we can talk about later, more in the in-depth episode, but that's what HUD is the actual federal Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Good to know.
Yep. So, moving into some analysis of the topic, a lot of literature on both sides of it outlines that this housing crisis is coming from a general lack of housing for both higher income, middle, and lower and middle income people. It's not a lack of one type.
That makes sense.
It's just we have too many people and not enough houses on all ends of the spectrum. And a lot of it comes from things like zoning policies, like it costs too much, not in materials, but in local laws to actually build new housing.
Yeah, because you have to have somebody come out and check for gas lines and somebody come out and check for water lines and power lines and
even for
set up spaces.
Right, even for construction companies building huge apartments, a lot of towns and cities are trying to stay away from continuously just building more and more and more. So they're making it very expensive for anything new to go up that's not like a park or a lake or some weird stuff like that. They're trying to get away from, it seems like, total urban just skyscraper.
Yeah.
So
it stands to reason maybe why a city would want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's just creating this housing crisis everywhere for everybody. So, specific pro and con approaches, both sides have, as always, a few different options. I think pro is going to have a lot of burden in this.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of the con side has the benefit of heartstrings and morality of the poor people, really.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and they get to throw gentrification around left and right like it's a dirty word.
Yeah, they get to say, the second we build market rate housing, 1 billion rich people move in, and then none of the poor people can survive. That's not actually what they say, but that's where the arguments come from.
Argument.
Yeah. Luckily, there's a lot of pro evidence that can turn the links and impacts of the con gentrification stuff.
Like we talked about earlier, and they'll all be available in the Candor Briefs.
The Candor Briefs release. Go ahead and buy that Public Forum rest of the season package for $130 if you want to save some money and plan on using it all. Constructive approaches, pro should probably run advocacy as just solving the market or the housing crisis overall for everybody, not advocating for one group of people, but just we need to build houses for the crisis.
You might even want to look into some evidence about how low-income housing perpetuates poverty cycles.
Yeah.
Because to be able to live in low-income housing, you have to be a low-income person.
Yeah.
And making the jump from low income to middle income is very, very difficult for a lot of families. So it's a lot easier for children to just do the same thing that their parents did and stay low income and live in the same areas.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. That is a very good point, though.
I mean, that's something I've even encountered anecdotally in my own life, that I've found really nice apartments where by myself it would be almost unaffordable and I would have very little money. But with one other person, I was making $12,000 too much to live there.
Yeah.
You had to be an individual making only this much, or two people making only this much.
Right.
And it was a laughable amount of money. It was only like, you couldn't live with two people in a low income apartment if you were making more than $22K a year together.
Which is nothing.
Yeah, that's full time at minimum wage.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's actually a really great point that, I'm sure subsidized housing does perpetuate poverty.
Well, yeah, because if you get into a nice little apartment where the rent's only $500 a month and all of your utilities are taken care of because they're getting fat subsidies from the government every month, what reason do you have to go get a degree and get a job that's more fulfilling or anything like that? You have spare money. You have everything you need.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it doesn't lead... It might lead to a survivable scenario, but it doesn't lead to a scenario where society is continuing to grow.
Right.
We become complacent.
And that's not obviously always the case, that people are just content with...
Oh, yeah. No, for every person that I'm talking about generally just accepting and being complacent in low-income housing, I'm sure there's another person that's saying, well, I'm only here for 6 months until I can get back on my feet, and then I'm going to move into a nicer place because I want to continue to grow and develop myself. Not to say that the house you own is a way to grow as a person, but it is... There's so much empirical data to show that the amount of money that you have available to you is going to directly affect your happiness, your education levels, all sorts of things. And if anything you're doing is perpetuating the cycle of poverty that you and your family is stuck in, you're not going to be able to move towards those goals.
Yep. So I'm definitely going to look into that and cut cards on that. For pro framework, we talked about the moral aspect of things. I think it'd be a good idea constructively in case building for pro to set framework as utilitarianism and argue that by building market rate housing, they're increasing the supply of housing for everybody, essentially working to solve the housing crisis, which is the greatest good for the greatest amount of people.
Do you think Khan has a chance to come into the round and say there is no housing crisis?
I think they could try. I'm sure somebody out there has said it.
I just feel like there's such a high homeless population in the United States, especially in urban areas.
Yeah.
That it would be troublesome to make that argument.
Yeah. I think there's a chance, and I'm sure somebody will. I don't think it'll stand.
So maybe do have that, though. Have like 1 or 3 cards that specifically outline the fact that there is a housing crisis.
Right.
Just so you don't end up on some runaway squirrel case that beat you because you weren't ready for someone to ignore reality.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is going to get brought up by Khan a lot is alternatives. Showing why subsidized housing is better, why voucher systems are better.
Well, yeah, they're going to come up and they're going to say there's other ways to achieve the same goals that pro is seeking to achieve that don't have the same detriments. And here are some of them.
The cool thing is, though, and don't forget this, Khan running alternatives, they cannot run market rate housing in urban neighborhoods. But pro running market rate housing in urban neighborhoods can also permutate all of Khan's alternatives.
The only link around that for Khan to stop the permutation is if they can prove that there's specific and unique drawbacks to market rate housing that they can't link into by also doing your stuff.
Yeah, generally pro can say, market rate housing is not mutually exclusive to subsidized housing. Voting pro doesn't get rid of subsidized housing. We can have both. So that's important to consider, because if we were debating this topic, the Khan case I would build would have alternatives built in.
For sure. I could see that being a point. Is there such a thing as above market rate housing? Like, are there houses that are specifically designed and neighborhoods specifically designed for rich people still, or is that a thing that doesn't really happen anymore?
Well, so the effect that's happening, based on, depends on what evidence you look at, but the effect that people are talking about is when gentrification occurs and wealthy people move into a low-income neighborhood, the wealthy people pay higher rents, and that jacks up rents for everybody. So, if you're living in a low-income household and you're used to this, what is probably market rate rent, when somebody wealthy and middle class moves in, that brings the value of the neighborhood up.
So the wording of the resolution almost solves for gentrification being a problem on the pro side in a way, because all of the housing that's being promoted to be developed has to be market rate.
Right.
And that's a weird thing.
But market rate is totally dependent on market rate. There is no set market rate.
Yeah.
It's just dependent on.
And how do you determine the size of a market?
Well, market rate is just based on location, access.
But
like
what restricts? So is the market of Los Angeles the entire city of Los Angeles and the surrounding suburban areas, or is it just the actual city limits of Los Angeles?
Well, so like market rate housing in like Los Angeles would probably come down to the block you're on.
Really?
Yes, because how close are you to public transit? How close are you to groceries?
To a school.
To a school, that kind of thing.
Okay.
All of that comes in. What's the crime rate like in that neighborhood?
So do you think that throwing out a bunch of homes on these blocks at market rate is going to actually cause gentrification?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it's weird. Is there anything in the way that the resolution is worded that would stop these houses from being market rate after they're built?
Like start off as market rate and then become subsidized?
Yeah, or become higher. There's not market rate, higher than market rate because of gentrification or so.
No, so generally...
I guess it wouldn't be higher than market rate because of gentrification. The market rate would just be raising.
Right.
That's weird.
Higher than market rate would be price gouging.
Which I think there's laws about that.
Yeah, but market rate itself rising is totally common, and that's one of the effects of gentrification is rent increases because of the value.
So would you say, based on the wording of the resolution, that these houses that are developed have to stay market rate? They can't then become low income later on?
I think that's extra topical.
Really?
Yeah. That's not within either side's burden of proof.
But I don't know, because I think that changes the impacts. Because otherwise you're just talking about theoretical houses that haven't actually been built that are going to have the impact the pro team's arguing for the first week after they're built, and then they're going to be changed into low-income housing.
Well, I think that's unlikely. I think...
Unlikely, yeah, but I still see... I don't know. I'm just thinking corporate corruption and of the like, and I don't trust anybody, and I'm a big paranoid ball of mess. So I'm assuming that there's going to be companies out there that are like, yeah, totally. If the government's going to promote this in the form of whatever, of us building market rate housing, then we'll take their promotion, I'm assuming as a tax write-off or a subsidy. And then they're going to turn around and say, actually, no, these are low-income houses because we want to lock factory workers into this area and not let them get any more educated and better jobs that are more fulfilling.
I think because there are situations where houses become subsidized. It would be far enough into the future that the impacts wouldn't matter in a debate round.
You're probably right. I could agree with that. I just don't trust anybody or any government.
Yeah. So looking at con analysis, con approaches, I think it's going to be best for them to set the framework for their side as who best helps the low income households. Seeing as the resolution could be framed as a moral obligation. Low income people need help. There's even less housing out there for them.
Could Khan argue for safe havens and homeless shelters rather than housing development whatsoever?
I mean, they could, but I think status quo, there's a lack of housing for everybody, but especially low-income households. Homeless shelters and that kind of thing don't solve.
Yeah, but the goal of those types of places is to get people back on their feet so that they can go back out and recontribute to society later on.
Right, but later on, there's still not going to be
That's true.
houses available if we don't
Develop houses.
some kind of
You're,
something.
yeah, you're right. You're
You know.
right. That's a Band-Aid, not a surgery.
I could see where that question comes from, though. That's interesting. But no, I don't think it wouldn't have the solvency that you would need for it to have effects.
I think it would have significance if you could prove that the majority of people who are suffering from the housing crisis, it's because they are literally homeless.
Right.
If you could prove that the people that we're trying to solve this crisis for, the reason that there is a housing crisis, the vast majority of people who need these homes are actually homeless, like they don't have property or somewhere to stay, and there's not like a safe haven or anything for them to go to. I think that would be an interesting point on negative, because I don't feel like building a whole bunch of market rate houses is going to do anything for a bunch of homeless people.
The idea is, at least when people are talking about developing houses, because everybody agrees that new housing developments that aren't subsidized are for higher income people. But what that does is when there's new housing available for the upper class, the middle class houses or the middle range houses that they were in become available, and everything filters down a little bit. So creating availability in housing at the upper end frees up space at the lower end.
I see that, but then because low income housing kind of stands outside of that curve because it incentivizes staying in it in a way.
And also it's important whenever we're talking about this to be clear. Whenever you say low income housing, are you talking about subsidized housing or just market rate housing that's affordable to low income people?
When I refer to low income housing, I'm actually talking about subsidized housing that has a cap on it for the max amount of income that people can have to live in the household.
Let's not forget that there is market rate housing that is just
marketed to low income people.
Affordable.
Yeah, affordable rather.
Because it's old enough or small enough or in the right spot that it's affordable.
Yeah, so if there's this curve where we build nicer, newer market rate houses, and all of the upper middle class and rich people and middle class people that have been looking to move to these newer houses, and then by default all of their houses are available, and they want to fill those houses, so they try to price them competitively or in an affordable way. If that whole situation is what it sounds like, if that curve exists, I don't still see how it solves the housing problem. Because again, like if there's a housing crisis and there are people without homes, they are homeless. And if they're homeless, I really doubt they have $180K saved up to buy an averagely priced house in the US.
Actually, that's this card right here. This is a pro card. I know we were talking about con side, but we kind of blurred the lines a little bit. California Legislative Analyst Office 2016. Another result of too little housing construction is that more affluent households faced with limited housing choices may choose to live in neighborhoods and housing units that historically have been occupied by low-income households. This reduces the amount of housing available for low-income households, and a lot of studies have documented this. So that's what I'm talking about whenever, even though new market rate housing is typically marketed to higher income, those higher income people are in middle income or low income houses.
So you've got people making $300K plus a year living in $80,000 bungalows because they just don't have anywhere else to go.
Right. And that makes it so that the low income households can't get in there.
They can't move
because
up.
Somebody else already is.
It's weird. It's almost like money is causing this whole problem.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if, I don't have a bed to sleep in because my parents don't have a bed to sleep in, so they sleep in mine. it's not necessarily the fact that I don't have money to buy a bed. It's the fact that there aren't enough beds available. Does that make sense? That was kind of a weird analogy.
Yeah, it's a weird analogy because for me, the problem still exists that, we have 10 beds and these 5 beds are nicer than these 5 beds, but they're not as nice as the beds could be.
Right.
And the people who have those beds can afford them and then some. They could afford even nicer beds if we built them. So we're going to build 5 nicer beds. So there's 15 beds now. Those people in the middle are going to move up into these 5 nicer beds. Those people at the bottom are going to move up into the 5 middle beds. And then those 5 bottom beds are going to be available to people who don't have beds. I still just don't see where we get the jump from people not having beds to being able to afford the lowest price beds even.
Right, because if they don't have...
Yeah, because if you're
if
homeless...
if they don't have it at all right now, just making it available doesn't necessarily make it available.
Yeah, so I think that approach, what I'm trying to get at here, I guess, is that I think there's an approach that Con could take that just proves that in general, developing housing doesn't solve like a homeless crisis or a housing crisis.
Accessibility doesn't mean affordability.
Yes, exactly that.
For the low income people. If it's not subsidized, it's not going to solve for them.
And I guess that's coming back to what you were just talking about in the beginning of this, the alternatives.
Yes.
That they can run, hey, this isn't actually going to solve any of the things that they're talking about as being bad, but this other thing is on the table, aka subsidized housing.
Yeah.
And this subsidized housing is going to solve all those things. And I think the only way that you can win that alternative argument is if you can prove for sure that doing market rate housing either has no effect or makes the problem worse.
Right. So that's a good transition. Let's move into some specific arguments.
Okay.
Let's start on pro, just because it's easier to go pro-con.
Mm-hmm.
I think pro should bring up examples. One example can be the Hope 6 program. The Hope 6 was actually market rate housing development. A lot of good things occurred from it. It began in 92. They demolished just bad housing and developed market rate housing in its place. And what I mean by bad housing is just distressed.
Oh yeah, stuff with asbestos, stuff with copper wires that are exposed, fire hazard.
It was going to be cheaper to demolish it and build something new than to make it.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. We've learned in the last century, we've learned a lot about safe building practices.
Yeah, they did 96,000 units. It revitalized. It had a lot of success. There's a lot of programs like this that have happened throughout the years. And I think it's a good pro approach to show when we have done market rate housing development and what effects it's had, especially when they're positive. Would you agree with that? Showing success stories?
Yeah. Yeah, that can help establish a track record and give credibility to theoretical arguments that you might be making.
Yeah. Because, whatever pro is arguing is never the status quo. So showing success in the past is a good reason to argue for a change, such as developing market rate housing. Because if we were already developing market rate housing, it wouldn't be the resolution.
Yeah, for sure.
What are you looking at there?
I'm looking at the number of homeless people in the United States. It's about 500,000. And
Wow.
It's been going down for the last 7 years until last year, which was the first year of the last 7 years that it went back up.
What did it jump like?
Not substantially.
How much did it go down by each year? Do you know?
I'm going to see if there's a graph or if the data is even in a table or anything I can read.
That's interesting. I wonder what the causation is behind that.
Statistics.
I read this article on Reddit the other day that said scientists have decided that they can't even prove causation in any studies. Sorry, that was totally...
How so?
They kind of decided as a whole that that in every study that they do, a causal link is never clear enough to call it a causal link. But there's just so many factors involved. I just thought that was a little bit interesting.
Well, that's kind of like the meta-analysis block that we used to run back in high school that was essentially just a singular piece of evidence that said anytime somebody brings up more than one study at a time to try and claim some sort of conclusive result, it doesn't work because there's no way that 2 studies, 3 studies, 1,000 studies, 10,000 studies are actually accounting for the exact same variables and were conducted in the same way.
I actually may need to cut that. That would be a cool argument to have.
Yeah, if my laptop hadn't died, I would still have it.
Yeah.
I could just give it to you.
We need to get that working.
So yeah, it looks like around 2016 it hit its lowest point, homelessness did. And then it almost like between 2007 and 2016 it was almost cut in half from like 260,000 to I'm not looking at the total numbers. I'm looking at unsheltered people. My apologies. But from 2007 to 2016, it dropped almost 100,000 from 650,000 to 550,000. And then starting in late 2018, it rose by another 2,000. And that, I'm wondering if that's just because of the bad weather we had last year with the hurricanes in Florida.
Yeah, there was
a mass amount of displacement as a result of that.
Stuff going on.
We're getting tangential, but yeah, homeless populations. I think you should definitely look into that on con.
Yeah. On pro, we've talked a lot about gentrification. There are benefits of gentrification. And I think that's, whenever you're on pro, you have to act like gentrification is not a bad word. Mm-hmm. It's a normal thing. It happens. It's happened throughout history. And if market rate housing causes that, then it's not a bad thing. There's evidence that shows that gentrification solves for concentrated poverty, that gentrification lowers the poverty rates of other people of lower income households in the area. It improves the quality of neighborhoods in terms of crime, educational attainment, employment levels, wage levels.
Well, I think that this is arguing that gentrification is a good thing is a pretty easy logical step to make, because simply put, if there is a neighborhood with a school that doesn't have excellent educational resources, and you move people in that have a lot more money available, and they're living in a nice house, so they have a higher property tax rate, they're spending more money in general, so they're contributing more local sales tax, it just stands to reason that there's going to be more resources available for development around that neighborhood.
But even with, poverty rates, that Hope 6 program we were talking about, one study found that there was a decline in poverty concentration of low-income households from 81% in 1989 to 69% in 1999.
I feel like there's so many factors that go into that.
Exactly what I was talking about.
Because that goes all the way through a full Clinton presidency,
Right. But it was the only thing that changed specific locally was this program of these new market rate houses.
Man, the amount of data that you'd have to pick through to verify that that's accurate,
I know,
would be astronomical.
I trust it. It's from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, though.
That's what they want you to think.
Yeah, they don't have any bias. They didn't make the Hope 6 program or anything. Why would they lie about it?
Birds are cameras, guys. Wake up.
Birds aren't real at all. Gentrification also can improve access to beneficial services. We talked a little bit about this one. In lower income neighborhoods, or at least every one that I've ever lived in, there was just a lot of fast food and crappy little gas stations.
There's not going to be a hospital in that part. There might be like an urgent care.
But the more gentrification that occurs, the more higher income, more higher educated people that live there, grocery stores start popping up. Like better just access to general services happen when there are more resources.
Yeah, instead of having one overcrowded school, they finally have enough money to build another school and split the kids up so that they're getting a more one-on-one education. Yeah. And that creates several hundred teaching jobs that are all in the middle class, and that's good for development. Yeah, so I get that. That makes sense.
So,
But then at the same time, what about the disproportionate effect that it has on, and this is a con perspective rather than a pro perspective.
yeah, let's move over to con then.
What about the disproportionate effect that it's going to have on other people's property taxes and other people's sales taxes and the like, when these richer people are moving in and they're increasing the cost of living for themselves only like fractions of a percent, but that translates to 15% for
Yeah.
a low income family.
So gentrification, it does, or at least, you know, if you're on con side and you're arguing this, it does increase rents. This card from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, May 2018, says rents increase significantly faster in gentrifying neighborhoods than in non-gentrifying areas. Rent burdens have been even more pronounced because of a greater prevalence of rent increases in urban neighborhoods. As of 2016, 72% of the lowest income renters face severe housing cost burdens, paying more than 50% of income towards rent. So gentrification does increase the overall value of the neighborhood, and that's great, but not for the low income people that have to pay rent based on that.
Is there a rural housing development argument that could be made on the con side?
I think so. I'm working on a line of argumentation about actually Native American reservations
Okay.
instead of urban neighborhoods. Not instead of. That's dangerous wording.
Yeah, you can't say instead of, because then you get into counterplan territory, but you can say this is an option that exists. We need to weigh it against the option that's being presented by the pro team in a cost benefit analysis.
The way I want to argue so currently Native American reservations, they need something like 70,000 new houses because of overcrowding and because of problems with their current housing. They don't have running water, they don't have heat, a majority of them. So Native American reservations need about 70,000 houses or units available. I would argue on con, as we see in California or whatever, they're already working on the overall housing market issue in urban neighborhoods. I would argue that the problem lies in places like Native American reservations. That's how I would word the argument.
Yeah, especially because there is statistical evidence to demonstrate that the people on the lowest side of the income spectrum are having the most amount of kids currently.
Yeah.
And so those people generally live in rural communities. So it would only make sense to me that the areas that are booming the fastest with direct effect on population are rural. And that's where we should be developing, not in the middle of town, forcing people to relocate.
Yeah, exactly. And generally, even if you are going to stick to the urban neighborhood area of the resolution, there's obviously a lot of harms of gentrification that you can argue, displacement, that kind of thing. So I've always liked con because you have so many options, like what we were just talking about, or addressing the resolution exactly how it is. I wish I was debating this topic. This is like one of the only topics I've actually enjoyed this year. And I was like, that's a good topic. You know? Should we talk alternatives a little bit?
I think we already did.
Yeah.
Just like I said before, don't specifically advocate for anything as opposed to what the pro side is bringing up.
Instead of, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, you just have to run a cost benefit analysis and try to do your best to link some unique harms to the pro team and market rate housing. And at the point that you do that, you pretty much win. Because even if they permutate, if there are unique harms that link into market rate housing, you say, yeah, that's great, Judge. They may be able to do what we're doing, like what we're saying could be done, but they're still also going to be doing market rate housing. Yeah. And that's bad.
Yeah.
What we're saying is we don't even need to do market rate housing because this other stuff could also be done.
The idea is, why waste time on market rate housing when more benefits occur from a lot of different options without the harms of market rate housing.
So yeah, you don't have to run alternatives. It's not even really a necessary part of your job as negative. But I think that it helps broaden the perspective of the round and make the judge realize that they're not just voting for market rate housing or against market rate housing.
Yes. The last thing, and this, I don't want to get deep into it. It's going to require a lot of explanation. So if I decide to do it, it will be on the in-depth episode. I'm considering, I have about half of a critique written for the con side. Again, I'm not going to get into it. People have expressed interest to me about running critiques in theory in public forum. So I figured I'd start writing one. If there is interest in a critique for this public forum topic, let me know. I'll write it, I'll finish it, I'll include it in the brief. If you think it's dumb, let me know, and I won't waste my time on it.
If you're listening on YouTube, to let us know, just put it in the comments down below.
Yep.
And if you're listening on any of the other platforms that we're available on, just email it to us at formerpartners@gmail.com.
Yep. Or Twitter @formerpartners. Or Twitter @CandorBriefs.
Yes. And all of those responses will be handled by Quentin because he handles the social media side of things because he is more active on that and also a lot nicer than I am.
Yep, I try. I'm a nice guy.
I think you're just not rude, is the thing.
Isn't that what nice is?
No.
Oh. Okay. Don't forget, guys, Recency mobile app will be coming out soon. The brief first release for this March housing topic will be available, I'd say, in the next few days, hopefully. Whenever it is available, you can use the promo code. We didn't really talk about anything pop culture today. We usually end up talking about a movie of some kind. Have you watched a movie lately?
Promo code Superman.
Okay. I think I can add that in.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a limit on promo codes.
Yeah. Superman is not our idea. It's a trademark of DC. We don't claim to own that IP.
I created Superman.
No, he didn't. Use promo code Superman
for $5 off the brief whenever it releases. That'll be at candordebate.com. Also, don't forget, you can get March, April, May, and June, first and second release every month, and supplementals if we release them for $130. That saves you $50 overall. It's a good deal, and I'm really broke. Please. Please. Oh my God. Please.
Also, if you're wondering why I just picked Superman for the promo code, it's not because I've watched any of the bad movies recently. It's because I recently started watching Smallville.
All the movies have been bad, dude.
Man of Steel was good, I thought.
Batman vs. Superman was trash.
It was pretty bad. That being said, if you haven't seen Smallville, you should give it a watch. It's really good. It's all available on Hulu. Hulu, show us some love.
Yeah, Hulu sponsor us.
We'll give us a promo code we can pass out or something for some sort of reduction on your monthly price, and we'll plug you every episode.
Nice.
I'll let you tattoo Hulu on my back.
I'll tattoo Hulu on my own back. I'll do it myself.
We'll live stream it too for you guys.
All right, that's enough. Promo code Superman for $5 off the brief when it comes out. Buy the package if you'd like. That's all I got.
Any questions, concerns, comments, thoughts, insults, anything else that you want to send us at the aforementioned social media handles and or email addresses. As always, this has been Former Partners. I'm Lucas.
And I am Quentin. Thanks, enjoy, and good luck.
Every time